Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our webinar today, where we're going to be talking about the expansion of technology in IP operations. I'm Russ Slifer. I'm the CEO of Black Hills IP. And one thing I've learned throughout my career is that we don't know what the future is going to hold. And that really applies to what we're talking about today when we're thinking about how do you manage an IP operation? What tools are available today and what tools are going to be available tomorrow, next year, 5 years from now? How are you going to implement those tools, whether it's reviewing invoices or contract reviews, docketing, renewals, analytics? All of these tools are being developed by different companies, focusing on different problems that we encounter from day to day in our operations. So thinking through that and how we're going to position ourselves to take advantage of things that we don't know are going to be here. So today we're joined with several panelists. They're going to share their perspective from their organization of how they think about implementing tools, what tools they may use, or some of us are vendors and how we're creating tools to help our customers to be more efficient, more accurate. So Jeff Cook joins us today. He's the Chief IP Counsel at Starkey Labs. Also, we've got John Monticello joining from GTC, a partner with that law group, and we'll talk about how he developed the IP program within that law firm. Mehrdad Asadi is the Chief Technical Officer at Patrick's. They developed the Patricia docketing system, and he'll share with us their philosophies on how they create their tools and work with customers. And then Ann McCracken, President of Black Hills IP, will share with us how we at Black Hills IP develop our tools and work with different vendors and customers. Before I kick it off with Jeff, I just want to let everybody know that if you use the Q&A button on this webinar and submit your questions, we reserve some time and we'd like to hear from the audience and what questions you have, and we'll field those after our panelists talk about their organization. So let me kick it off with Jeff and what's happening at Starkey Labs.
Thanks, Russ. I'm Jeff Cook. I'm in-house counsel at Starkey Laboratories. We're the largest US-based hearing aid manufacturer, and we have a very active research and development group that's doing things like adding sensors, internet connectivity, and artificial intelligence to hearing aids. So you can, for instance, count your steps with your hearing aids or watch a movie on your phone and stream the audio to your hearing aids. To serve this really active R&D group, we have a very lean IP team of highly experienced IP professionals we're fortunate to have a very tech-savvy team. And we're always looking for new ways to adopt technology to help us be agile and effective in serving this R&D group. Some of the things I'll talk about are aspirational, things we hope to do. Some are things we've implemented. Next slide. So in the portfolio management aspect of our practice, we use an automated docketing system, which has really worked out well for us because it's allowed us to free up scarce resources to work on other things like portfolio mining, management of budgets, things like that. So the web-based automated docketing has been a huge asset for us, allowed us to free up a paralegal and promoter into a different role. Patent mining is one space that I'm constantly struggling with how best to use the different tools available. We use a Black Hills dashboard to keep track of what's in our portfolio and help us navigate from an in-house view between different files, understanding the family members, and really understanding what we have and how it's valuable. And part of that for me is to be able to quickly navigate between matters and identify matters for particular inventors so that on the fly in discussions with our clients, we can have a really rich conversation. Another aspect where we always aspire to use technology is in workflow, if that's talking to outside counsel or if it's working internally, but being able to keep the workflow crisp and smooth. I find myself using a lot of browser bookmarks to navigate between systems. So we still have a need for system integration or a comprehensive system to be able to help us access all of our data. but being able to make tactical decisions to go from the strategic down to tactical, understanding a particular case or a particular prior art reference, and then zoom back out and understand where it fits in the broader portfolio is something that we really aspire to be able to speak meaningfully to the business about what patents mean, what a particular patent might mean for the business, but then also speak with the requisite level of detail to make intelligent decisions. Portfolio pruning is another place where we're always using technology here. I'm also relying on the Black Hills system, as well as a tool called PatSnap, which I'll discuss in a minute, but to understand how a particular patent fits in our portfolio and what it might mean, so that we know which patents we can let go of to make space for new cases as we file aggressively, and then prune aggressively, or at least moderately, to manage our budget. Next slide, please. Competitive intelligence is another place where we're always looking to expand our use of technology tools, and we recently switched to this PatSnap tool, which is so replacing for us Clarivate, allowing us to do searching with a more iterative approach, to be able to run a search and then sort of slice and dice your search results, zoom in on particular aspects of a portfolio, and understand how we fit, how our portfolio fits in compared to our competition, where we may be light or where we may be heavy, both geographically or technology, from a technology perspective. Another part of that, of course, is identifying technology focus areas where we may be heavy or where we may have a blind spot, and that's useful competitive intelligence for R&D group that they may want to start working on something. And then also identifying new entrants using those technology tools. Next slide. So similarly in the risk management area, so doing our freedom to operate work, making sure we've done our clearance analysis, that we don't step into a patent thicket that we didn't know about. We're very reliant on technology tools. Here I find myself navigating between search tools and sort of old-fashioned spreadsheets and pivot tables to be able to navigate through information, and some proprietary mapping technology from a law firm to help us efficiently move through patents with our R&D clients who those engineers don't have a lot of time, so trying to facilitate rich discussions that move quickly. European oppositions are another one that, you know, we have a global view of our patent portfolio management. We have 4 of the 5 major hearing aid companies are based in Europe, so we see a lot of European activity, including opposition activity. And being able to understand those oppositions, understand how those integrate back into our US practice, understand the timing of the oppositions so that we can inform our business folks about what that means. It's a place that, you know, I would like to have more tools. We're relying a lot on spreadsheets and lists to keep track of those kinds of things. Another place that we have aspire to use more technology is in prior art management. So there's a lot of different prior art references sort of floating around in my head and in others, either minds or lists somewhere. And so we're working on identifying ways to keep track of that so that we notify our US counsel so they can cite references. And so we just remember what exists. Next slide. And finally, in the budget management space, a big part of our work is managing the flow of cash and understanding what law firm fees will look like. I just created a budget for 2021 and it's only June. So being able to predict what next year's spend will look like. And a lot of that's things like looking at how many cases we had pending on January 1 this year and projecting how many cases in the US and Europe would be pending in January 1 next year. I've actually built out spreadsheet models, so economic models based on pendency numbers and things like that, that on average have been pretty reasonable, but you know, it's all handmade in-house stuff. So we're looking for more technology tools to be able to address that, understanding patent prosecution. European oppositions are a big hit to the budget, and that tends to be a big hit all at once as you either write an appeal brief or prepare and attend a hearing. As another space, I'd like to have better technology integration so that we can make all those pieces fit together. Annuity forecast is one place that our finance group has been really happy, is we're using a web-based tool, the Black Hills tool, maintenance tool, to understand what annuities we'll have when, and just in the budget for next year, for instance, I was able to run the entire 2021 forecast. It'll change because new patents will grant and we might abandon some, but at least to understand what we have that will come due next year. And there can be significant change from, I had a 25% change from one year to the next, just based on when US patents grant, when those annuities become due. And then finally, mid-year adjustments. The COVID-19 event caused us to take a look at our budget, and being able to rapidly articulate some options for changing the way we do things to change our spending rates. From, being able to having that financial model built and having the annuity forecast available to be able to say, okay, if we abandon 5% more patents, or if we file all of our patents as PCT applications instead of filing a utility application, US utility application, what's the impact of that? Those kinds of technology tools. We'd like to have more sophistication there. We're, again, using a lot of spreadsheet-based tools. Next slide. So in sum, we were trying to integrate all these different tools together, make them all fit together, and be agile and responsive for our clients.
So Jeff, before we kick it over to John, I've got a quick question for you.
Yeah.
You use a lot of tools in your operation, and I know you've got a limited workforce. So how do you plan for adding more tools, evaluating them, going through that process? That's time consuming.
That's what? Yeah.
It's time consuming. So I was curious on how you handle it.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, it makes us better, it makes us more effective. So we just have to make time for it. We do a lot of leveraging, networks of other, so take the shorthand route of ask other chief patent counsel what they're using. There's a pretty active group locally here in the Twin Cities that I'll get some benchmarks from them. That's how I discovered PatSnap, was sort of an informal, formal email survey. The evaluation, a big part of it is sort of word of mouth, and then getting, it's just, we have to take time. So we'll do a lot of demos, so sampling different vendors, asking them to explain what they have, how they use it, how other clients have used it, having a pretty transparent conversation about what we're looking for, what problems we're trying to solve. And we found vendors are usually very proactive in understanding, maybe anticipating questions we hadn't thought of, or functionality of the tools that we didn't even realize was available, or advantages that we hadn't perceived. So we don't have to figure everything out ourselves, but relying on the experts, the expertise of others in my position, and then the vendors that can really explain to us what's available. Because you're correct in sort of suggesting there's so many different tools that are available, and they fit together in different ways. And it's really just staying active in those conversations.
Yeah, that's a good segue for John. I think, John, I know you spent a lot of time evaluating tools before you started the patent operations at GTC. So look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide. I'm John Monticello. I am the head of the patent practice at GTC Law Group. Just going to quickly sort of give you a little history or background on GTC. We've been distributed since our inception. Okay, so I don't say virtual law firm, we're a real law firm, but we happen to be distributed. And we decided really early on to focus on developing a team to develop or to deliver our distinctive offering, which happens to be tech intensive M&A transaction and patent strategy, and the prosecution and preparation that comes out of that patent strategy. That's our high value function. And that's sort of a theme that you're going to see in my slides today, is sort of the focus on high value function. So that's sort of in our DNA, that focus, right? And so what we wanted to do is find the best people to perform those functions, those high value functions. Brick and mortar the location has never been that important to us. And it sort of freed us from constraints of finding the right people. We're looking to enhance our practice with the attorneys and the technical experts, no matter where they come from. So I have a comp sci PhD from Colorado, neuropharmacology PhD from Massachusetts, medical technology expert, PA, automotive expertise, Indiana. We're in Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Connecticut, so on and so forth. You know, I think you get the idea. It freed us up. It wasn't important to us where the bricks and mortar location was. Also, it didn't matter to us where we store files. We've been paperless since the beginning. Another reason that we've been distributed, and what's also sort of in our, you know, foundational DNA, is that we want to reduce overhead and consequently the cost to the client. So we're not dependent on location, but we are dependent on technology, and I think that's why Russ and Ann asked me to speak today. We're very technology dependent. Next slide, please. So what are we looking for? What are we looking for when we're selecting technology? Or the technological tools to help us run our business. I'll go through some of these bullets. Again, we want to focus on our core offering, our distinctive offering. As an example, providing our clients with docketing services is not our distinctive offering. I don't think that's why, well, I know that's not why they come to us, our clients, and it's not something we tout. It's something that has to be done very well, but it's not why they come to us. The other thing about it is, you know, docketing services requires extensive training, has extensive management needs. It's very technical. We want to take the time that would be focused there on our core offering. Good docketing services, and I've had experience with a few, employ technology, which requires continual maintenance and training as well. So docketing is not one of those areas where I think, you know, we need to spend our time. We just want it to be done well. Also, proofing, quality checking. So human proofing is a place. Proofing of patents, antecedent basis checking, things like that. Reference numeral checking. That can be done by a human and was done by a human. It takes a long time, you know, again, wanting to stick with our core, focus on our core distinctive offering. If there's technology that allows that to happen, we're in, because that allows us to focus where we want to focus. Not to mention the price pressure that's existing, that's in the business, and you know, not everybody wants to pay for an attorney, you know, proofing for hours. I have amendment shell creation. What I mean by this is when you file a response to the patent office and you have the base document from which you will start your response and amendment. That takes time for a human to do. If we can have those, our folks working on other things besides that, just gives us more time to focus on our valuable offering. Another thing we look for, one of our technology requirements is it's got to reduce overhead. Mentioned that at the beginning, more foundational principles. It's got to be scalable too. We want to grow with the business. When we first got started, you know, the startup costs of some of these docketing systems out there was, you know, it was prohibitive. So we look for things that were appropriately priced from where we were at the current time. And so there's some subscription-based technology. There's subscription-based docketing software that was sort of priced for where you were at the time. That helped us in the beginning, and we're long past that, and we've grown. But it's stuck with us, and we still think it's sort of the right way to pay for services, at least for that. You know, you're not paying for something you're not using. Next slide, please. Other requirements is for us, because we have people almost everywhere. It's got to be easily accessible from everywhere. So if it's cloud-based, we like it. Maintained separately by the provider. We don't want to have to be too involved with deployment, updating, and it should improve quality and outcomes. So I mentioned proofing. antecedent basis checking, reference numeral checking. Obviously, this improves outcomes. There's software that does it. So that sort of hits on that lever there, improving quality and outcomes. And there's also another example would be examiner and USPTO statistics. We like to look at those and to help us make tactical decision in the preparation and prosecution of our patent applications. That can be very valuable. Please, next slide, please. So this is just, I have those technology requirements across the top and just some of the main areas where we've used technology or outsourced. So like, just as an example, I mentioned outsourcing docketing. Yes, that helps us focus on our core offering. It reduces our overhead, our cost. It's scalable, grows with you. You don't have to have a set number of docketers that you hire and have to train, and if there's turnover, have to manage. Certainly is maintained separately, and it's obvious that a good docketing system improves quality outcomes, and more importantly, it saves you from bad outcomes. Docketing software, and by the way, an example is Black Hills, who we happen to use for our docketing services. Docketing software, again, we look at it for these areas. Focus on core offering, reduces overhead and costs. An example would be a subscription-based service, which I think, or one that's sort of based on the number of matters that you have. I think that hits on the levers of scalable, accessible, maintained separately. I think that's really where we focused our effort. An example of a type of service like that would be Foundation IP. There are others. And then I mentioned patent proofing. Again, helps you focus on your core offering. If you're spending 2 hours a day trying to figure out antecedent basis, that's a 2 hours you could spend somewhere else. And so we like these kinds of tools. Certainly reduces overhead and costs. Scalable. If it's cloud-based, it's accessible and maintained separately, and obviously improves quality and outcomes. An example is Patent Bots. There are other examples like Patent Optimizer, and I'm sure there's others. I don't have them all in my head. Next slide, please. And so budgeting and forecasting, that's another one. Jeff mentioned that. We use a tool to help us with that. IP Estimator is an example. Because we're distributed, we are collaborating and project planning remotely a lot. So we were an early adopter of Teams and Microsoft Planner, these Microsoft tools. With Planner, it's like, it simulates, for me, I guess I'm a little old school. I like to have all the things that I'm supposed to do that day stacked up for me. And so our teams can assemble my, it's almost like files on your desk for that morning, but they're in Planner, and I can just kind of move through them, because I find email to be extremely inefficient way of getting things done and collaborating. So the future, what am I, where do I see our firm moving in the future? I think we're going to keep looking for tools that enable us to stay true to our principle and focusing on our value, our highest and best use. That's what we're looking for. I do see a trend in a lot of tools becoming available. I get a lot of emails, a lot of requests to look at some of these tools. I think as these options become available, I think we're all going to experience that it's more difficult to evaluate them. So my view of the future is, if the value is readily demonstrable, and if it has low setup and transition friction, those solutions will prevail. If I got to spend a lot of time trying to understand how it's going to help me, I'm probably not going to do that. Yeah, that's about it. I hope that helped.
Thanks, John. Your last bullet points, I think, are a good transition to Mehrdad, to talk about how their system, I mean, I think you'll see Patricia's readily demonstrable on its value, but also how they work together with other vendors like Black Hills to make that integration much easier. Mehrdad?
Hi, thanks, Ross, for having me. My name is Mehrdad Asadi. I'm CTO at Patrick's, and we provide global IP software for patent life or IP matters, lifecycle, and management. We have client representations in 5 continents, 50 countries. So IP is a truly global business. So we're being happy to be able to provide that support for the last 27 years. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends that we've been looking at and what we've seen in the IP business as such, and kind of where it's driving us into the future. We've seen that IP business become more commoditized the last 10 years or so. There are simply more influx of service providers from various countries and continents, which drives the prices down as well. In addition, the IP data itself has become a commodity, pretty much thanks to the patent offices or organizations that made the data available. So that also allows us to consume that data. Just going back a few years, you had to fight to be able to get data from IP data providers. Nowadays, they're actually looking up or searching for new businesses and opportunities. And I think that's the pressure that's being brought in from organizations like WIPO and EPL. The other aspect I think we also seen is that the margins are getting smaller. So the price points are getting lower and lower. This is corporations have their budgets, so they're pressurized to lower their budgets on the IP side. And law firms follow suit with having to provide lower priced services. But again, the new influx of service providers, that's also a contributing portion to the margins that are kind of shrinking. Now, the last piece that we have seen is that the services are becoming more available, either online, cloud-based solutions, and so forth. So you no longer have to have everything on your prem or on site. So you can very easily subscribe to services and utilize them, which kind of takes us to the next slide, please. Which drives the level of collaboration that need to happen in this business. From that aspect, we do see that there is a need for simplifying basic functions, such as exchanging data between the providers and law firms and all the players that are within the space and such. That requires a little bit of an open view to the aspects of being able to collaborate and work together. So that put a pressure on providing open systems that can communicate securely with each other. Currently, the technology has been there for many years, so there's really no need for continuous sending emails or similar. You can very easily communicate with other systems and submit data into those systems. Next slide, please. So our philosophy has been to provide a solution that can be customized for various needs. And the one size fits all may not be applicable anymore. So focusing on developing something that covers all the bases is still something that happens in the business, but also the ability to be able to open up and interact and integrate with other systems has become much more needed. And I think personally that's something that's going to drive this business forward in terms of being able to get services from service providers with a non-human interaction and be able to send and receive instructions and data. So based on these, we made some decisions. One of them is to work with providers such as Black Hills. where they have very specialized services that they provide, but also solutions that provide as part of the partnership that we have, rather than trying to develop those ourselves within our own business. So next slide, please. Stepping back a little bit then, so what we did for being able to mitigate these, about 5 years ago, we started our major rewrite and redesign of our platform, Patricia, which was released recently. And part of the key elements in there is to be able to provide interaction and integration aspects using open and existing standards. This is something that we built on about 10 years ago. So we did try with what we call data exchange and submitting and receiving data in the past, using the WIPO standards. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there were standards such as ST 36 and 22 that were used for dictating how data should be exchanged between the services. And we feel like we're a little bit ahead of our time back then. So this is more of a time has kept up with us. So this allows us to actually deploy these APIs within the Patricia environment to be able to communicate with vendors such as Black Hills. Now, what I'm going to do here is that what I described is maybe a little bit abstract. So what I'm going to actually run through is 2 shorter videos to show you how that interaction and integration can look like in Patricia, but also how we can consume data from other systems. So if you run video 1 first. So in this scenario, we are logged into the system and we're then fetching case information. And we'll be fetching data from a general data provider, which in this case is the European Patent Office. And what the function does in this scenario is that it goes out, authenticates, fetches the data that is applicable, and then provide a comparison of that data, which then can be downloaded and updated within the system. And that will then trigger various reminders or whatever that is attached to it. But this is one way of pulling data and fetching it through the APIs that are available and store them in the Patricia system as such. If we move to the next video, please. This is another way of integrating. In this case, we're integrating with the Black Hills services. I think this is the first video, so please do the second one. So in this scenario, we're actually interacting with the Black Hills services. Rather than fetching data, we are using the in-place function and viewing data that is produced by the Black Hills services. Similar way, the APIs are used for authentication, validation, and being able to fetch the information from the analytics services. We don't store any of this information. So this is just in time. We can go out and refetch the new information again whenever needed. So rather than duplicating data and storing it over and over again, we simply hook up to these different services. So I thought this might be kind of visualizing the functions or the features that we provide in terms of integration, but also how it takes us into business and how we can provide collaboration and added value throughout the integration with other systems. So back to you, Russ.
All right, thanks, Mehrdad. Before I hand it over to Ann, there was a couple of questions that popped up online. One of them is, does the API for Patricia allow integration with other data management systems like iManage, specifically to read to or read from?
So those are very tight, simple, or those are in place kind of authentications or integrations. So yes, it does provide such.
Okay. Ann, why don't I throw it over to you and then we can hit some more questions afterwards.
Great, thanks, Russ. All right, so I'm Ann McCracken. I'm the president of Black Hills IP. I included my LinkedIn identity there because I post a lot on legal technology. And if you're really interested in learning about developments in legal technology, follow me because I'm regularly posting legal tech and AI type of articles or reposting them on LinkedIn. Okay, first slide, please. So legal technology is very well developed in some other fields of law, but it's been a little slower to be adopted in IP operations. For example, there's well-developed e-discovery, contract management, research technologies, but there's a growing number of vendors like Black Hills IP and Patrick's that are, and some of the others mentioned by Jeff and John today, that are providing tools that are really useful for IP operations. Our approach at Black Hills is to apply technology, particularly AI and smart automation, to the traditionally manual IP processes for docketing and paralegal work. And I heard the word mentioned by a couple of other speakers, subscription. We really have moved into a subscription-based economy when it comes to IP operations. If you think about the old way, the traditional way that this type of work has been done, it's been on site, it's been paper-based workflows. Humans are looking at, particularly for docketing, the documents to classify them and determine what they are, or to determine what needed to be done with them in a docketing system. The information is keyed in manually into docketing systems. It's very resource intensive for labor. It's expensive, it's error prone, inconsistent, and it's slow. But with the expansion of technology into IP operations, the new way of doing things is to have these processes automated. They're working with cloud-based systems, have electronic workflows, interoperable systems. As Radad demonstrated, there's different sources of online data that can be pulled in and integrated into these systems. You automate those processes that were being done by a human to determine what a document is, classify it, determine what needs to be done with it, automate the data entry rather than having people rekeying information. When you do those things, it's very fast, it's accurate. You don't have the people to manage, and John mentioned that a little bit for his organization. No servers, no software, and you've got 24/7 operations. So that's what the technology is allowing you to do in the legal operations environment. So let's go to the next slide, please. Particularly with respect to docketing, I've seen statistics that as high as, and maybe it's even more than this, 25% of your IP staff time, paralegals, docketers, is spent on very routine administrative tasks. So if you think about just the docketing process and the low value tasks that you might have very high value people doing, that would be things like downloading documents, converting things to PDF, renaming things, uploading things, manually keying things into systems. Those are all very automatable. Not only that, here's another statistic. I'd say 80% of the docketing errors that are made are due to human error, just human mistakes. So at Black Hills, those were the things that we set out to address, and we set out to automate docketing as our first major thing. So our docketing process uses extensive AI and smart automation techniques to address those problem areas. We've automated the identification of what the document is that's being processed. And, you know, in my experience, that's one of the hardest parts of the docketing process. If you can correctly identify what a document is, it's a lot easier to do the rest of the process. But you have thousands of documents from hundreds of different countries that people have to know what they are. It's a very automatable task, though. Same for determining what to do in a docketing system once that document has been identified. There's rules. It's rule-based, right? Every country has rules for when you get this document, here's how long you have to respond. It's not arbitrary. So that also lends itself well to automation. And then just the data entry. Obviously, that's a low-value task to have people keying information in to docketing systems that already exist in typically in electronic forms in other sources. So for example, the USPTO, a lot of the data that you're keying into a docketing system, like the name of the document, the mailing date, critical information like the application number, it's already in electronic form, but yet so often in the traditional process, the person is then taking that and manually typing it in. But when we have systems like Patrick's with an API and that data can just be moved into that system, that automated process is much, much better. Not only that, we've also focused on the quality control aspect of the docketing process. So once the docketing is put into the docketing system, the traditional process is to have a person look at and do a second eye review for quality control. Again, that's very resource intensive and not an efficient process, but we've automated that and built over 15,000 independent rules to verify that the docketing was done correctly. So that's just one example of where we've focused our automation efforts. Let's go to the next slide, please. We've found that, particularly with respect to the US docketing correspondence, up to 90% of the docketing can be fully automated if we're dealing with a system that has an open interface or an open API to it. And when we do that, the advantages are that obviously we reduce the human labor that's involved, so you don't have a person touching it at any step of the process. You increase accuracy tremendously. You reduce the turnaround time, and you have standardized your docketing process when you do that. And that's also a key to having a high quality back office operation for docketing. And I think Jeff mentioned, just from his personal experience using automated docketing, he was able to free up paralegal time, and particularly in an organization with a small staff, that can really be valuable to move that person into a higher value function within the organization. So the key to all of this, though, is to have systems that can communicate. And again, Mehrdad, thank you. You made that point quite well. We need to be able to have systems that can talk to each other, systems that can share data that's available to be pulled into these systems. So having an open API is really, really critical to this process. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So just if you're interested in learning more about open APIs, there is an initiative, Open Legal API. There's a website for this, so I put it in, included a slide for that as well, just for your information. Now, what's the future and where are things going? Well, there's many other areas in IP operations that lend themselves well to automation. I think we mentioned earlier that Black Hills has a renewals platform, for example, that has automation. And the renewals platform that we have is built on an analytics platform originally. That analytics platform, it takes data from a lot of different sources, pulls it together, and allows the user of that platform to make renewals, annuity and maintenance fee payment decisions in a much more efficient way. And Jeff mentioned, for example, just being able to do budget forecasting and tasks like that all through a single interface that in many organizations right now is quite a job, just to assemble the information to make decisions, particularly in organizations with larger portfolios. So with respect to the future and the trends, our focus is going to be to continue to do what we're really good at, and that's automating the IP prosecution, or the automation of IP processes, basically. There's many other aspects besides docketing and renewals of the IP paralegal work that lends itself well to automation. Our approach is to look at the IP processes and say, first of all, can this process be automated? And if for some reason it can't, then the next question is to say, if not, what can be changed about the process so that it can be automated? And I think, as our listeners go forward, those are good questions to think about in your own IP operations as a way to look towards expanding technology into your own IP operations. So Russ, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, and actually, I've got a question online. It's a little bit detailed or a little specific. You may want to expand this a little bit. But the question is, with Patricia and Black Hills integration that Mehrdad was sharing, will that integration have the ability to retrieve IDS references? And you can answer that one specifically or more in general, with the open API, what is possible?
Sure. And Mehrdad, I may have you speak more specifically to Patricia, but I'll just talk about reference management in general, because that's a great question. And that's one of those tasks that's tedious, time consuming, and ideally would be something that could be automated. There's a lot of sources of data out there right now that have, for example, like Global Dossier, that has citation lists in electronic form. So that's a good example. If you can take a list like that and have a system that you're working with that has an open API that can pull data like that in, import it into the system, that would be a great way to save time and apply technology. And Mehrdad, I don't know if you want to jump in on that with respect to Patricia specifically, or just leave it general.
No, that's fine. I can give a short answer. The answer is yes, and the long answer is yes as well. So
okay, good.
For being able to do that.
Good, great.
Good. Jeff, I've got a question for you, and that is, from an in-house perspective, how do you plan for budget, seek approval from those that you need to seek approval for, picking a new vendor, switching, suppliers? I've had the experience where you go through the whole process, and then 6 months later, another vendor comes along, and you kind of have buyer's remorse. And so I'm just curious on how you manage that yourself.
Yeah, we try and be deliberate about the decision-making process, so that if we're going to make a switch, we take a survey knowing that we're going to make a multi-year decision, and not wanting to, every time a shiny new tool comes along, make a switch, because there's operating costs, training costs for the personnel, and then the data uploads. And so, we wanted to make sure that we sort of surveyed the market, understood really what the tools do. So we're not just making a price-based comparison, but understanding what's the impact on our labor situation, if it's shifting work to us or taking work away from us, and understanding from a technology functionality perspective what it can do, and then also sort of forecasting what's coming. So understanding the durability of the tool over time, getting a sense of the company, if it's sort of a stable and evolving company, or if sometimes they're sold to a financial interest that's less interested in customer service and more interested in just revenue, and which has created the source of frustration as part of what made us switch, for instance, to their current annuity provider. That happens to be Black Hills. So it's a combination of lots of different factors, sort of the nature of the parties and what they can do. The other, from a budgeting standpoint, technology tools are expensive, but we still spend way more on law firms than we do on technology. So, and the technology allows us to leverage the people that we do have better. So I view it as worth the investment, and we want to be intelligent about what we're doing, but we want to make sure that our people have the best tools, and we're using the tools in the right way to make sure that if we're authorizing work, that is being done with good information. And so I've viewed the decisions we have made have felt like we had a very positive return on investment. And then from a budgetary standpoint, we've had pretty good support from our finance and IT groups to do what makes sense. They understand that because we've got such an experienced team, and that we've explained our robust sort of interview process, that we've gotten a lot of cooperation and not pushback. I've worked at other places where it was different. So the other people wanting to weigh in on the decision and sometimes leading things astray.
It's interesting from a, we work in a innovative environment with putting together portfolios for our companies and our clients. And sometimes you see a disconnect between the interests or the innovation of the company and the desire to invest in that innovation in other areas, like in the legal side. So, John, I've got a question for you. I know you are kind of the champion at GTC, or have been, for evaluating technology and making sure that the lawyers, the law firm can focus on your areas of expertise. So how important is it to you? I guess this is a two-part question. I'm assuming that the lawyers at the firm embrace the change when you bring it on with some new tools. And the second is, how do you stitch the technology together? We've talked about open APIs and vendors like Patrick's and Black Hills working together for the customer's benefit, but from your perspective.
Yeah, so the first assumption that you had is that that people kind of get on board. I think just because of who we are and how we started in a distributed fashion, we necessarily were predisposed to utilizing technology in our operations. So we're going to orient it that way, and that's made it easy for me, so far. And you're right to highlight the fact that there's sort of this need to stitch things together, right? I see that as a relatively recent need that's kind of come on to our radar, at least. We spent a lot of time kind of getting used to the tools that we're using, and now, right, it's like, how do they work together? And the question is, how do you make them? I think that's like the present question that we're facing right now, honestly. And I can only say that it's a recent challenge that we're actually looking to solve now, and we haven't solved it yet. So we're loving our tools. We like what they do with us, and now the tools are becoming, like they have to start to play nice together. It's something we need to look at now. I think you're muted.
Hey, Russ, I think you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
I had a typical Zoom faux pas there. I forgot to hit my unmute button. So, Mehrdad, question that came up about all the talk about open APIs, and are there security concerns? Are there data integrity concerns that the customer should be concerned about?
Of course, as soon as you put something out there, make it available, open, there will be security issues. But at the same time, technology is already there. So it's a question of mitigating that using the proper technology. Authentication, validation, there are opportunities and solutions already out there. So that should not be the reason why we should hold back on integrating or exchanging data.
Good. I don't have any more questions that have come in online. I can throw more out, but I wanted to open it up to the panelists if you've got questions or something you want to share.
Hey, John, I had a question. So we haven't worked together, but I was interested in hearing about your technology. Are you seeing clients ask about your technology tools? Because I know I've sort of migrated to firms that are using technology, and I'm asking, what do you use to make yourself efficient? Because I see the difference in quality and service.
So there's that type of question. It's like, what tools do you use? How do you use them, and how do they result in a benefit to us? That is a question that we get. I think it's a very sophisticated question to ask, and clients should be asking that question. And the answers, you should like the answers you get. They should be well thought out, and if they're not, then I think it's indicative of the fact that they might be still flipping through the 3 full paper files, which, you may or may not like. Another type of question we get is related to, and it's interesting, the access that they can have to the technology that we're using, okay? So can we have access to your docketing system for our docket? Can we almost sort of leverage the organizational structure we've already sort of put in place for them? But I think it's a really good question to ask, and I think it's a problem that we as law firms have to solve. I think, that's one of I didn't mention this in the future section of what I talked about, but I worked so hard on like our operations, but I think now it's time to sort of turn outward and make this patent practice be more user-friendly and a more user-friendly experience to our clients, right? And just sort of take it to the next level. Not everything has to be a reporting letter, an email, and all these sorts of things. We can sort of make this a little more, modern, slick, and user-friendly. And so clients, they ask questions, that sort of point me in that direction.
Well, John, if you don't mind, Jeff, I'm just going to hop in there for a second, because we kind of see that that same trend that, John, you're talking about from our side, where we handle docketing for a law firm, and then their clients want the law firm to docket into their systems. And so they ask us to perform that duty for them, because they've already moved from, if you will, the manual process of docketing, and would like to share that technology, if you will, with their clients.
Yeah. I think it's just a challenge of organizing it and presenting it to your stakeholders, right? I mean, it's that people struggle with that, and we already have a way of organizing it and thinking about it. It's easy for me to look up a case and see where it is, but it's not always that easy for our clients. And so they're asking, can you share that with us? Can we have some access to that? And I think, I'd like to move into a direction, or think about that, at least where that's more shared. We both have a shared understanding together of where everything is and what we're all doing on it, and what this patent covers and is directed toward, and what that patent covers. Right now, there is a disconnect there, and I think that clients are rightly asking for that disconnect to be removed.
That's great you're thinking about that, John, because I recognize that too. And I've been on both sides of the practice, but mostly on the client side. And certainly, and I'm more interested in being able to talk about a specific case and navigate quickly to things. And I don't necessarily care when the next, missing parts is due or what the next extension fee, right? So it's not a docketing view, it's a portfolio view.
Right, or what a missing parts is, like you're the type of consumer that knows what it is, and so you don't need the same like long explanation of what it is each time it comes to you, right? Like, so there should be ways to tailor more easily what these things are and what you really have to look at, and maybe what you can look at later, like so some other inconsequential communication. That's where my clients are really pressing me. It's like, what, come on, tell me what I really need to do here with this.
Well, I hate to interrupt. We're down to the last few seconds. I want to be cognizant of our viewers' time. I want to thank our panelists for sharing what is a complicated topic and affects each one of us differently from our perspectives, and really is just the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about implementing technology across vendors, from clients to law firms, what we've got today and what we're going to have tomorrow. I'm sure that John, Mehrdad, and Ann would be happy to talk with any of you about the services that their organizations provide. And Jeff, I won't send anybody your way looking for work, but thank you for tuning in and joining us today on this webinar. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.